Good night. Can't say good night to start a show. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but I said it anyway. I'm Ryan Thomas. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Thomas Take Sports podcast tonight. Very excited to dive in to the news. I don't want to say it's old news. It's important news that I have to dive into, and I'm a little bit late on diving into this news, but it's news that I think is very noteworthy, very important for me to discuss because I have my own take on it, right? And my own very own take. That's why I do this show so that people can hear my takes, hear my thoughts, and then I can hear their thoughts. This isn't just about me, it's about you. You guys can chime in. Fire away comments in the comments section below. Let me know what you're thinking on the Buffalo Bills' decision to extend Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott. Because there is a lot to discuss with this. And as always, I like to see things from a different angle, provide a different thought to just a simple headline. It's more than just a headline, it's a reason, a thought process as to why this happened. There's a reason for everything. Everything happens for a reason. We hear that all the time. And I think the timing of this decision was noteworthy. I just want to put it that way. Well, let me put it more loud, more clear in terms of why I think this happened. With the Buffalo Bills' decision to extend Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, I didn't mention through 2027. So, come the end of the 2027 season, their contracts will officially be done. To be honest with you, I'm going back to the blue. So, there we go, back to blue. So, of course, for the visual audience. So, the question with this news is obviously, first and foremost, we're reaching uncharted territory, especially for any kid that was born in 1992 like myself, with the Buffalo Bills. In reference to the fact that their general manager, their head coach, longevity, consistency, a process was trusted, and a process has been seen these last 5, 6 seasons with the Buffalo Bills. There's no doubt about it. They've been successful. They've been a team that's been a playoff contender. But if you were to ask any member of Bills Mafia, a tried and true member that's went through the 4 Super Bowl losses, whether it's wide right or even a diehard Buffalonian like myself, who not only, I didn't really necessarily go through wide right in the same form and fashion that my dad or my grandfather did, but I did go through 17 years of no playoffs. I did go through 17 years of lackluster coaches and even worse, lackluster general managers. And even worse, a lackluster franchise. Let's be honest, the Buffalo Bills were a laughing stock for a number of years. They were not seen out of the 30, 31, 32 franchises. They were not looked at as a legitimate one for quite some time. And there were rumblings for years that the franchise wouldn't even exist after the passing of Ralph Wilson. And unfortunately, Terry Pagula, changed the notion um, from everything, to what they were able to achieve. The whole notion. I want to go back to this because I just had a flashback as I was talking. So when that moment happened, and let me just provide context, okay, to just the whole situation. Anyone that's 30, 31, 32, I always talk about like my age, like it matters, but in this context, it really does matter. I didn't get to experience the 4 Super Bowls. I didn't get to see those moments. Maybe that was for the better because I don't think I'd be as big a Bills fan as I am now had I gone through that. I just don't. I know it was very hard for a lot of people in my close quarters to continue to support the team after one of the greatest teams that's ever been assembled. Couldn't get it done once. Couldn't get it done twice, let alone 3 times, 4 times in a row. So I understand, why it's a little bit harder for guys 50, 55, 57 and in their 60s and higher due to that fact. I mean, they crushed on your heart, they stepped on your throat, stomped on your testicles, whatever word you want to use. And yes, I did just say that. It's been very tough to be a Buffalo Bills fan, right? Over the last 30 years. But imagine being 30. Imagine being 31. Imagine some of these kids nowadays, they've lived the high life. I see kids now, coming home from school, they're wearing the Josh Allen jersey. I wish I could be one of those kids. I didn't get the chance to be one of those kids. I had Trent Edwards. I had J.P. Lossman. I had E.J. Manuel. I didn't have Josh Allen as a kid. I had Josh Allen in my mid-20s. For context, he's younger than me. So you see where I'm going with there? It's been a long time since we've had this consistency. When I put it that way, in terms of the consistency that they've had, it's really hard to think that way when this is a results-driven business. The one thing that we want more than anything, whether you're a Bills fan that's 75 or 25 or 35, however old you may be, is a freaking Super Bowl. That's what we want. That's all we've wanted. And when you've knocked on the door so many times and you haven't just kicked it down, you've only knocked on it after no one would answer the door, knowing that someone's in the house. You get my point. It's like, what are we doing here? Why can't we just kick this door down and make this happen? Why can't we kick the door down and knock into our own house? Because at the end of the day, this is an opportunity. This is a destiny that this team, I think, does believe that they should have accomplished by now. And that goes back to Stephon Diggs and his frustrations and everything of that nature, that this team believes that some of these guys believe, man, we have come up short. We are missing out on the potential that we have, and we feel like we should be a part of a moment like that. And I can't disagree with them, because in my thought process, it does appear as if the team has been one of the best 4 or 5 teams in the NFL the last 3, 4, 5 years, especially the last 2, especially the last 3. It seems like this is really a year where if the Bills don't get it done, what do they need? What more do they need? You look at that team top to bottom, there's not really a lot there that's much of a need necessarily, as much as it is a want. You might have had maybe, I mean, if you were one of those people out there in April or March or February that raised your hand and said, my God, we need another tight end, God bless you, because that was not on the to-do list for me at all. Not saying that I'm mad at the Dalton Kincaid pick. I'll be talking about Dalton Kincaid a lot over the course of August, September, as we inch closer to the season. But that wasn't really it was just a want. There isn't many needs on this team anymore. There's not many guys drafted in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round that would start on this roster, due to how talented this team is top to bottom, due to how they've built this team up to the credit of Brandon Beane and how it's been coached. That's another story. As to knocking on a door and not being able to kick it in, what's the reason for that? Is that the players, the coach can't control the players? There's always that argument. The players have to play, the coaches have to coach. The coach can't put the coach can't catch the ball for the receiver. The coach can't throw the ball for the quarterback. I know that. Bill Belichick knows that. Sean McDermott knows that. Mike Tomlin, you get my point. But these Bills fans and football fans in general nowadays, more than anything, they're very smart. They see it. They know what they're seeing. They know what they're watching. This game is as popular as it's ever been. And the reason I offer you guys that thought is that when we're in that crunch time situation, down and distance, situational play calling or situational calls, clock management, when to take a timeout, when not to take a timeout, when to throw the challenge flag, when not to throw the challenge flag, Sean McDermott has epically failed in those moments. And those are the crunch time moments that the Bills needed to move on in the playoffs. For whatever reason, wild card round last year, they're playing Skylar Thompson, a 3rd-round quarterback, and that was a close game. Next week, they're moving on. They're playing such and such. They play the Bengals. Can't even remember but they're playing the Bengals. We'll go to that. And they were flat. There was no urgency on the team, despite everything that they'd been through, and everybody was left to wonder, what the hell was that? What version of the Buffalo Bills was that we just watched? Because we didn't see a team look like that. We didn't see the team look like that all season long, and yet they ended the season on that note. The Bills hadn't played 4 consecutive quarters in one game that poorly all season long, and yet it happened when it didn't need to happen. In the worst moment, win and move on, lose or go home. And the Bills went home and they didn't have to travel that far because they lost that game at home. So now we're in this season, and I think Brandon Beane has had a very successful offseason. I would even argue that this has been the best offseason that Brandon Beane has ever had, with the cap situations that they've been in, with the amount of signings that they've made. I could even go back to a couple weeks back. I talked about it as soon as it broke, the signing of Leonard Floyd. I was ecstatic for that signing. I still am. I think that that's a true rarity to see a team bring in a player of his quality beyond the April draft or May or June. I mean, to get a guy when they got him like Leonard Floyd really is just astonishing. It really is. So I feel that Brandon Beane has done a phenomenal job, but more than in terms of this offseason. But with that, now I feel like there's more pressure on McDermott to really deliver now than there ever has been before. And it's odd to me. I say that people would say, well, why? Based upon the fact that they've been competitive and they've been knocking on the door? Yeah, based on that, as well as the fact that Sean McDermott is now the defensive coordinator once again for the Buffalo Bills. This defense is under his thumb. If this defense is not as successful as it needs to be, it's on him more than ever. Before we could point the finger at Leslie Frazier, now Leslie's gone. So if the defense is not what it needs to be, now we're pointing the finger at the head coach. Much, much different. And there were still people, these past couple years have been pointing the finger at McDermott anyway, but now it's only pointed at Sean McDermott if something doesn't go right with the defense. And this defense should be very good this year, on paper, of course. So I think this decision was made for a calculated circumstance, a calculated reason. And that circumstance, it's not lost, it's not falling on any sort of deaf ears, that the circumstances of this team have drastically changed within the last few weeks. Without overhyping it or underhyping it, let's just say the circumstances around this team plainly have changed. When you go back to that NFL draft, round 1, April, late April, and you're in that first round and you're picking 27th overall, and you see the Buffalo Bills move from 27 to 25, and they take Dalton Kincaid. And the only guy that can vouch for me here, and I think he will, but the only guy that can vouch for me here is the guy that I was sitting next to watching the draft. The guy that I was sitting next to watching the draft was my dad. And we've watched the draft every year together. It's one of our finest traditions outside of partaking in a Lock City pizza now and then. And when we're watching this, okay, the Bills are coming up 27. Then we see the Bills trade up. Okay, who's it going to be? But it's after you saw a series of teams in a row take a wide receiver. When I thought it was God's honest opinion here, I thought that there was no way the Bills would come out of the first round without a wide receiver. I thought it was going to be a wide receiver, whether it was Zay Flowers, whether it was Jordan Addison, whether it was Jackson Smith and Jigba, no matter who it was, as long as his name was read and it said wide receiver blank blank out of blank. That's what I thought I'd hear. Then those names went in succession to teams that didn't even necessarily need them. That just goes to show you how firepower hungry the National Football League is. But then the Bills go up and they say, okay, well, we're going to take the best tight end in the draft, the consensus best tight end in the draft. And I'm not knocking the pick. I didn't knock it, on my show in the aftermath of it. But I did knock it in this regard. The moment that pick was made, one of the first things I said to my dad was, okay, you have a very frustrated wide receiver on the team who wants to win and knows that when the ball's in his hands, the chances of them doing that are very, very good, right? He's one of the best players with the ball in his hands in the NFL. He makes things happen. Stephon Diggs, best route runner, one of the best yards after catch guys, one of the best receivers in the world. It's you can't debate it. He's one of the best. Top 3, top 5, however you want to rank him, he's in there. I'd say top 5. I can make a case top 3, but just to be fair, I'd say top 5. But how does that look to Stephon Diggs when you go out and draft a tight end or a receiver, but mainly a tight end? Now you're changing the personnel packages that you're going to be running. You're going to have 12 personnel out there. Or technically, kind of 2 tight end sets, bigger bodies, 1 less receiver. Which receiver is that going to be? Maybe sometimes Diggs won't be on the field and Davis will be with the tight ends. It can really change quite a lot. And Ken Dorsey has been eager to make this change. And I think if I were to give a guess as to why there'd be any frustration from Stephon Diggs, it would be due to that, as well as the history of failing in big moments in playoff games offensively, as well as Allen not really seeing the field and not getting him the ball. And that's one of the things that I love Josh Allen to death, but there are moments last year where that did happen in games that they lost. Listen, I'll say it once, I'll say it again. This team had a phenomenal season given everything that this team went through. I'm not knocking the ability of Sean McDermott to juggle all of these emotional constraints that are unprecedented. I've never seen a team go through what they went through last year. Not any team in any one single season, maybe since the Marshall Thundering Herd in 1972-73, had we seen a football team go through what this team has gone through in 2022-2023. And that was a team that they died in a plane crash. And I'm not saying that in a joking manner at all. I'm saying it in terms of, wow. I mean, this city went through a lot rallying around this team last season. And this was a nationwide story with Damar Hamlin, a nationwide story with one of the most successful business women in professional sports having health struggles. The shooting in May last season. Dawson Knox, his brother passed away. The Matt Ariza story, which we now have a lot of information on that now that we didn't have a year ago. There were so many layers to this team last year, and Sean McDermott was really the only one left to juggle all of them. And I think he did a damn good job at that. But we're talking football here. We're talking end results. What were the end results? They were a lackluster showing against the Cincinnati Bengals. And maybe there is something to this. Maybe there is something to the fact that, Sean McDermott, he coached that team up as much as he could, and the team just ran out of gas. And that does happen. I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand. I've seen it on teams, coaching teams, playing on teams, watching teams. I've seen teams run out of gas. I've seen the look in somebody's eye that I never thought I'd see, knowing that they had run out of gas as a part of the team. And once that happens, it is over. There is nothing that can be done. It's too far gone. So you throw that out there as well. As I mentioned, I do believe this was a message that was sent to the team. I'm not saying this message was sent to Stephon Diggs only, but it was sent to anyone out there. Bills Mafia, Stephon Diggs, any player, as well as the National Football League, that these are our guys. We have gone through X, Y, and Z as a team with these 2 guys, and we are going to trust them to take us to where we want to go, because nobody's taken us closer in the last 30 years than these 2 guys. And it's a worthy thought. When you had Tom Donahoe, Doug Whaley, Buddy Nix, all these different GMs, I go through the laundry list of coaches that they had post Marv Levy. One guy, Wade Phillips, Greg Williams, Mike Mularkey, Dick Duran, Chan Gailey, Doug Marone, Rex Ryan, who the Pagulas hired, which was the biggest mistake that ownership group has made in terms of coaching. And maybe the biggest mistake that Brandon Beane has made, and if you were to tell me a year ago, I'd say this, would probably be the signing of Von Miller at this point. The big cap number that he had going into a season at 32, 33, blows out his knee. Who knows what version of Von we're going to get? And he's making a lot of money. And one of the things that I do want to emphasize is one of the reasons probably that they weren't able to keep a player like Tremaine Edmonds is because Von Miller was on the team. And in hindsight, I would have rather kept the first round linebacker that we took when he was 19 years old than a 32, 33-year-old defensive end that probably has 1 year left in his career. This is probably the last year that he's actually going to play. Now, I don't have any sources on that, but Von Miller talks about more things outside of football now than he ever has before. And he doesn't need to play anymore. He's done enough. There's many things to do in life when you're a guy like Von Miller outside of football. So I wouldn't be shocked if this was it for him. And I'll say that right now. I've hinted at it, but I'll say it. I've talked about it with friends and folks that watch the show off the air. I'll say it right now. I think this could very well be Von Miller's last season in the NFL. We know it's potentially Micah Hyde's. We know it's potentially Jordan Poyer's, despite signing a 2-year contract. That second year would get voided if he did retire. So what is the identity of that defense that's led by Sean McDermott look like when it's drastically changed in 24 and 25? And that's a storyline for next year. But for this year, this was a message. A message is being sent. The question after that we ask ourselves is, will this message be heard? And that is something that only time will tell if this message will be heard. And J. Lou Rose Collection, they say, if there's no Super Bowl, there will be a coaching change on the horizon. Now, I got to say, I absolutely was a Sean McDermott fan, through and through when we went through this whole ordeal with changing coaches and things of that nature. Now, it took me quite some time to really come around, in terms of, okay, was I supporting the team through thick and thin 100%? Was I watching every video on their website when it would get posted, when they do the Bills in Focus with Chris Brown during the Chan Gailey years and the Dick Duran years, and all those years with Trent Edwards and JP and EJ and Buddy Nix and all those guys, Tom Donahoe, Drew Bledsoe, like going all the way back to that? Was I as dialed into the team then as I am now? 100%. I always have been dialed in, but with each head coach that they'd hire and fire, it became almost a nauseating experience to see, hey, the Buffalo Bills are holding an introductory press conference for their new head coach again. Well, we just did that 2-3 years ago, and here we are doing it again, and we're doing it with a guy that, up until him coming to Buffalo, the only, claim to fame that McDermott had was being the DC of the Carolina Panthers and being in the coaching tree of a Rivera and an Andy Reid, which you don't scoff at that, but you say, okay, it's another first-time head coach. What makes this guy different? That's a worthy question to ask yourself. So you watch the press conference and you see that this guy has a competitive, unifying vibe about him that I could see could only come from a place that did not involve football and involved a sport that I know very well, and that's wrestling. The mental edge that you have to have in a sport like that in comparison to football is night and day. You have to have a mental capacity to play football 100%. I did play that as well. But you have to have an even higher level of, I guess I could say, mental toughness would be a vague term, but mental drive, tenaciousness, forgiveness as well to the thought of you making a mistake. You can't make mistakes, because if you make a mistake, it's only you. If you make a mistake on the football team, you got 10 other guys out there with you. It's only you and the guy that you're going against. And I think Sean McDermott kind of brought that mentality to the team in terms of preparation and things of that nature. And I think it was infectious because I think it's exactly what guys on that team then needed. And it was able to help them create a culture that the team hadn't had in many, many years, maybe ever, to be quite honest. Because let's be honest, I love those 90s teams, but Marv Levy was all about the culture in a sense that he wanted the players to play together, be a team, have fun. Maybe a little bit too much fun sometimes, but it is what it is. It was the 80s, 90s, different time, right? Those guys now could not get away with half the things that those guys did then, and they'd be the first to tell you that. So I'm not saying anything off the cuff here. They just love to have a good time. We'll just put it that way. But McDermott runs a very different ship in the sense that, hey, we are one unit, one drive, one force moving forward. We're a family, we're a team, we're this, we're that. And it's so cliche, but when the results were bought in, when the message was bought into and the results transpired that did in his first season, it was infectious to this team. And I think each of those years, those 2017, 2018, 2019, those years were the best years for Sean McDermott. That's who Sean McDermott was and is a unifier of individuals to lead to the basement, from the basement to the penthouse, and I think that they were getting there. And then when they got there in the form and fashion that they did by taking a guy out of Wyoming that really nobody saw coming, I don't believe in my heart of hearts the Buffalo Bills even knew what they had when they took Josh Allen. I don't believe that this team thought we're taking the best quarterback in this draft. I think they thought we're taking the biggest quarterback in this draft, and we're taking the quarterback that has the biggest arm to cut through this crazy weather that we have here in Buffalo. And they weren't wrong on that. Pull up the YouTube highlight reel of Josh Allen in Wyoming. Clearly the biggest arm, clearly the most athletic, but very raw. And clearly they themselves did not believe that Josh Allen was week one rookie material. They started Nathan Peterman over Josh Allen. And that's the stuff that I'm talking about, guys. That's scary when you really think of that this is the same franchise, the same coach, rather, that actually started Nathan Peterman ahead of his rookie quarterback. They didn't want to throw the rookie out there right away. So then they said, well, we're going to give Nathan Peterman the start. He was horrible against the Baltimore Ravens. They didn't have a first down the whole game until the third quarter when Allen came in. His first pass, first down. The team never looked back. And they're not going to look back for a long time. God willing, this kid stays healthy, right? So, honestly, I truly believe that we're at a point where the fans really feel they deserve the opportunity to see this team compete for a Super Bowl. And they do. They're not wrong. But what is it that's standing in their way? And I think more than anything, the only thing standing in their way is themselves. I go back to week 3 against Miami last season. There were so many reasons and so many circumstances as to why they lost that game. Many of it was outside of their control. The heat was bogging down both teams to the point where the Dolphins even were looking at this like, holy crap, like this is actually the hottest game that we've played in. Like, this is insane. And then when you saw the moment where the Bills lost that game, Isaiah McKenzie doesn't get out of bounds in time. And Ken Dorsey just flips shit in the booth, putting it mildly. That's when I knew, okay, the pressure is weighing on these guys. This pressure is undeniable. And maybe that's not a good thing. Maybe it is. And okay, double-edged sword there. That's what I thought. Maybe it's not a good thing. Maybe it is a good thing. So then weeks go by, they don't lose at all. For a few weeks, they don't lose. And then they play this stinker of a game in the East Rutherford, New Jersey dump that it is. And you're wondering, what the heck? What Bills team was that? What team was that? That's not the Bills team that we know. You're going to have a stinker in there. Every team's got a stinker. That was the Bills' stinker of the season right there last year. The Minnesota game was close. The Minnesota game, that is my definition of a team beating themselves in a game. How many times did they have that game in hand and they gave it right back to the Minnesota Vikings? To me, people could say, well, that's coaching. People could say, well, that's the players on the field. To me, there's crucial situations in games where coaches make decisions, and the decisions they make can impact whether you win or lose. And I thought McDermott in that game was one of his worst coaching performances that he's ever had. Ken Zintel says, I'm not excited for this year. I'm hungry. Give me a steak and lobster or give me a new chef. Give me a new chef. And that's the thing. I mean, I'm not going to be on here and I'm not going to be calling for Sean McDermott's head because it's way too it doesn't I'm not, you know, crapping on Ken's take here. I understand where he's coming from. I want it just as much as anybody, right? But Ken is saying it in a sense that, okay, if they don't win the Super Bowl this year, and maybe I'm taking Ken's words and spinning them. If I am, let me know, please, Ken. Of course, always appreciate you tuning in. But Ken is saying, give me the steak or lobster, Super Bowl, come hell or high water, or give me a new chef, give me a new coach, give me somebody new in the kitchen. And I gotta say, I agree. I agree. I agree with that thought. It's a worthy thought. Joel Gibson, shout out to Joel, been a supporter of the show for quite some time. We used to have a lot of debates, Joel, but over the years, I think we've grown to know that we agree with a lot of our same points. It's just in terms of thought processes on certain players, maybe I like some other guys more than you or vice versa. But he was banging the drum for a while, as was I, that the Buffalo Bills needed to take another tight end. The question was when, and I didn't think it'd be Dalton Kincaid in the first round in that draft. And I talked about that a little bit earlier in the show, Joel, but I was talking in the sense of the fact that the Bills had that 27th pick, they moved to 25. And could they have moved up and taken a receiver? Well, clearly they missed the boat on that because all the receivers went in a row, and then they took Dalton Kincaid. But Joel says the way that you win games matters. It's not as simple as a W is a W when you're struggling to win every single week. Do you think they struggled to win every single week last year, though? The weeks that they did win, do you think it was a struggle? I'm not saying that you are saying that, but just from your perspective, Joel, like what were some games that you felt like were a struggle to win? I feel like the games that they struggled to win in were games that they themselves made it harder than it had to be in order to win. Case in point, the Detroit Lions game on Thanksgiving, even that game, a game that they won, that's a game, to your point, that they struggled to win. A game that they struggled to win, in my opinion, that they won but didn't win was against the Minnesota Vikings. I have to say, Joel, I never thought that we would ever see a game like that in our lifetime. Of just I've never. I mean, I've seen a lot of games like that, but that was probably one of the worst games I've ever watched from a Buffalo Bills fandom standpoint. Joel Gibson says Dorsey doesn't understand the importance of controlling the clock. When you can't do that, anybody can keep up with you. And I think this season, maybe more than the McDermott and the Beane extension, like if I were to pick one guy that the spotlight is on him and nobody else, it is Ken Dorsey. I mean, what Ken Dorsey does or doesn't do with this offense is what will depend on the Buffalo Bills' success. If Dorsey's unsuccessful, the Bills will be unsuccessful. And if Dorsey's unsuccessful in like record low numbers, which I doubt, but if he's unsuccessful with record low numbers, I think we could potentially see Dorsey be fired during the season. And that would not shock me at all. It would not, because the time is now. I mean, you're only going to have Josh Allen at this point in his career for so long. You're only going to have Stephon Diggs at this point in his career for so long. You're only going to have the guys on defense that I mentioned before, guys like Micah Hyde, guys like Trey White, guys like Jordan Poyer on this defense for so much longer. This is a very physical game, and you are not going to be the same player at 30 that you were at 25, or even the same player at 27 that you were at 25. Joel said he was referring to mostly the second half of the season. I agree. I agree with that. I think, their inability to close out games as well, close out games, meaning like running the football with a lead, that is why it's been so hard these last few years for them to consistently win games at the point that they need to. Because of the fact that they can't run the football to close out games these last few seasons. That to me is more than anything something that's got to change. And I think this offensive line this year will be much, much better. And I just feel like a broken record saying that, though, because I said that last year and it wasn't. So, and then there I go again. I feel like I'm being pessimistic just based on past results when really I shouldn't be, because we haven't seen those results come to fruition yet. I do like a lot of the guys that they added to this team, though. I do like the Deontay Hardy move. I do like the Trent Sherfield move, underrated, low risk, high reward guy. I do love the Kincaid pick. I love the Osiris Torrance pick. I feel like their offensive line, David Andrews, Connor McGovern was their first free agency signing for a reason, I feel. So, I do think that they're going to be better at that. And I do think, as much as it pains me to see Devin Singletary wearing a different jersey, because I love Devin Singletary, to be honest with you. I really did. Um, I know a lot of people didn't, and it seemed like he was probably one of the more disrespected players that was out there. But seeing Devin Singletary today in a Texans jersey, that was kind of tough for me. And it's like, that's just one of our guys. You know what I mean? Like, no matter what did or didn't happen, I just felt like that was one of our guys. I felt like, that I felt like that was one of our guys, just putting it mildly. But I do think Dwayne Harris is better, or Damian Harris. I said Dwayne. Damian Harris is better. I really do. He's bigger. He's stronger. He's more of a savvy power runner. Uses his body really well. Against the defense and just in terms of looks and vision. I love his ability. I think that was a really big signing for the team, and I don't know if he's the RB1. I think Cook lays claim to that, but we get into the dog days of the season, November, December, and you need somebody with some thump. I think Damian Harris is that guy. Joel Gibson chiming in again. He says, this was the first year since 2020 that I can feel like we can win, and that's mostly because of Kincaid. He's special. So I want to let you guys know of something, too. I got some breaking news for you guys. So I'm not going to fully dive into it, but I am going to say that there's something big on the horizon with this podcast. In particular, not so much with the podcast, but from myself, from Ryan Thomas. So I'm working on a project, putting it together. It's going to take me some time, but it's going to be something that people will be able to purchase and subscribe to. And it's going to be something that's going to really help people with something that they play. So put two and two together there. In terms of that, it's got something to do with fantasy football. We'll just leave it at that. But Dalton Kincaid is a key factor within that space of what I'm working on. So keep your eyes on that, Joel. I know you're a big Dalton Kincaid supporter, as am I, and loved his game at Utah. I also like Michael Mayer as well, who got drafted by the Raiders. Thought this was a great class of tight ends. There's a couple other ones that I really like too. But Dalton Kincaid coming to Buffalo. Just in terms of a little sneak peek for you guys, Where do I have Dalton Kincaid ranked in terms of fantasy football tight ends? I have him ranked fifth, which actually makes him the highest rated rookie out of any rookie in my fantasy football rankings thus far. I don't have Bijan Robinson ranked in the top 5 of running backs. He's ranked at 7. I do have Dalton Kincaid ranked at the top 5 of tight ends with Kelsey, Kittle, Mark Andrews, TJ Hawkinson, and Kincaid. And frankly, I think Kincaid can be higher than Hawkinson. Just out of respect to Hawkinson and his game, and being the force that he was as the second best tight end in fantasy last year, according to my point scoring settings in my league, he was number 2 to Travis Kelsey. Due to respect of that, I think he'll have a good year, and I put Kincaid at 5. But just a little sneak peek to what's to come. I got some really cool stuff coming that'll be released in August, so keep your eyes open. I believe August 1st will be the launch date of that new stuff. So there'll be that and much, much more. So stay tuned for that. Of course, I'm going to just put it here in terms of August 1st. August 1st, a big, big day in the history of doing what I'm doing. So keep your eyes for that. Um, this is going to be a big, big moment for myself, and it's going to be great for you guys as well. So stay tuned. And of course, I greatly appreciate you guys tuning into the show tonight. I'm Ryan Thomas. It was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Take care.